All righty. I think we are recording. All right. Well, thank you guys coming to this class tonight on polycule mapping and strength finding. This is a kind of rebranded project of mine. I've done public health mapping and polycule drawing and strength finding, positive psychology, all these kind of different things in different ways. This is just a different mash together of those topics that I think is kind of helpful for polyamorous nerds to think about and study. But yeah, we're going to be focusing on polycule mapping or polyconstellation, polycule drawings. A lot of people have different names for them. I use mapping because that's like my background, and strength finding. So these are our goals to get today, not necessarily in this order. We're going to uncover the strengths of the individuals in your consensual non-monogamy network, starting with yourself. We're going to explore the strengths of polyamorous people in general, and like thinking about it as like a community sort of angle, that systems focus, looking at your network and saying where are the strengths within the network, not just the individual people. And then like we're gonna really like think about how to draw out our poly networks. You know, there are different ways doing it. And if you don't like my way, take what you want from it and use it to make your own version. You don't have to do it the same way I do it. That's one of the great things about polyamory is like there's so many different ways to do things, and that's generally good. Who am I? Well, what do I bring to this? So I have a couple different names depending on like what field I'm working in. But I'm out about being a polyamorous person and a queer person and a kinky person in all my settings. So I am Cassandra Jones, professionally, I guess more so. I use Cassandra Rhines for my education brand. And then I'm also known as Mistress Cas in the kink world. I do sex therapy and sex positive mental health counseling as my specialty. I'm so close to getting all the golden tickets in line. So I'll be very soon an associate at Respark Therapy with an LPC associate, but you know, waiting on all that paperwork. So in the meantime, I'm focusing on education and, you know, bringing in my public health background in infectious disease epidemiology specifically, and bringing that skill set to mental health, sexual wellness, relationship education, all these different things that I just love talking about with relationship nerds in general. I love doing education. It's kind of what I view as like community counseling in a way. So this is like a big part of what I focus on in my, you know, public health arm of my outreach. I bring that sex positive angle and this public health systems focus to pretty much every professional project I do, whether it is leading a kink social group or like writing research on these topics. I am pansexual and queer. I'm polyamorous. I identify as leather. I'm a cis woman. I have multiple disabilities, some not so invisible, some more invisible. I am mixed race, but, you know, obviously white passing. I'm fat or overweight, whatever you want to call it. And I am crazy. I like using the descriptor crazy as like a take back, kind of like how the queer world like took that word back from being a bad thing. I have a mental health diagnosis. I don't think crazy has to mean like a negative, nasty word. Same thing with fat. And, you know, if you want to look into some of my previous education, follow me on any social media, whatever you want. I have so many things on my link tree connected to my education work specifically. You can look at my history. You can go on my YouTube where I have some free classes. You can order access to some of the more advanced classes that are unlisted on YouTube. And sometimes I just have stuff up on the link tree that are resources I'm connected to that might be interesting to my community. Throughout this class, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We are recording, so I understand like if you are worried about your anonymity, if you are talking about your relationship network and other people in your relationship network, like I'm not going to identify names at all if I'm referring to what you said in chat. I'm just going to say so-and-so said this about partner A and partner B doing blah, 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 all that. I'm going to try to be anonymous as possible, but please speak up and ask questions. I love hearing other people's point of view. And I know that like the downfall of anyone is thinking that they have the right answer to everything. So I really like learning from the people who come to these classes, as well as like giving what I know to you guys. So I like that back and forth. But, let's get started more on the topic. Let's see. We're going to start with thinking about polycule drawings in general. It's not something uncommon to talk about in the polyamory world. These diagrams here are just examples from Tikva Wolf through Kimchi Cuddles. They do amazing, even customizable polycule drawings that you can hire them to make of your individual polycule in this style with these cute little animations and cartoons. But people have various reasons for these. But sometimes like it's just fun to like look at your relationship network and draw it out a certain way and make some just interesting connections, or seeing how enmeshed sometimes our polyamorous networks can get. But health professionals have used social network mapping and even sexual genograms that are like more about our families for various different reasons to maximize health within social networks. Yeah, I come from a infectious disease epidemiology background, and I have used social network maps to understand the spread of disease within a social network. So I kind of took that experience and made my own version of drawing polycule maps and diagrams. Some people call them polyconstellations. There's all sorts of names. And I think you should really like figure out like what ones like vibe with you in your world. And think about the different uses you can have for these drawings. You can do the things like STI transmission, like, oh, person A got whatever STI. Now we have to like look at who their sexual partners are in our diagram. And like, yeah, the health department will do that too for a lot of the reportable conditions. But like you can do it for things like idea and education transfer. Like we'll use a social network diagram in peer education network programming, where we see how a trained peer educator spreads the ideas of like wellness to their social network. Or, I'm going to bring it more about talking about community strengths, talking about looking at these diagrams and then adding information to them to help us see the strengths of our network on the individual level and the community level. And you can do this in a different way. I'm sure that you guys will play around with this on your own and discover like what works well for you guys and what just seems superfluous to you as well. So these are more the Kimchi Cuddles Tikva Wolf version. Please go support them if you really like this version, especially these cartoons. But here's my version. This is usually much more like a snapshot in time of a social network. But I like using a concentric circle model to really help delineate like distance and social distance between the connections in this map. So I put myself at the center. Like this one is from like 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. I don't even know. I have like a library I kept throughout like my mental health training. And I had to do this for like my sex therapy training too, is for myself. So I kept a couple of these throughout the years. It's interesting going back and looking at them, and I have them dated so I can see that connection. But it starts with putting yourself at the very center. And where you put someone else's name on the page is usually like dictated by how much social or emotional distance there is between you and that person. This doesn't have to just be polyamorous partners though, right? Like you can include your best friend, who is maybe like a platonic partner to you. You can include family members. If you don't have like a whole polycule to draw about, map this out right now, like think about your origin family or your chosen family, things like this. Like family and social networks are very, you define it as you want it kind of thing. So include who is important to you. Doesn't have to necessarily be like a formal relationship type of thing. Use various styles of lines and shapes to indicate relationship types, genders, orientations, whatever you want to notate on this. I use, different markings around someone's name to indicate like gender. I use different little symbols to indicate like orientation. The dashed line for me is usually like a casual or informal relationship, and the solid line is a formal relationship. And this might look a little hierarchical, and like, yes, you are showing like who is closer to you, but this is not prescriptive. Like I said, this is a snapshot in time. This is descriptive. And you might not want to then go to the third level if you're anti-hierarchy, if you're maybe like a relationship anarchist or something like that. It's okay if you don't want to like delineate your circles here, your concentric circles. I use 3 circles though to represent the levels of relationships. So the innermost circle represents your like inner circle of relationships, my inner circle of peoples, my top 5 kind of thing. Some people might think of this as like their primaries, whether that's, a single primary or multiple. And then, outward to the secondary and then the tertiary level. But, some people might just have themselves in the innermost circle, like someone who's solo poly. Or, they're someone like me. I am usually like, I'll have a lot of friends put into mine as well. They're not like formal relationship connections. Maybe we have some play partner connections here and there, like in my kink world, sometimes there's a lot of enmeshment that way. But like sometimes there's not even a line from me to a person, but there's still some relationship there. That's why I like using the closeness of like the space on the page to delineate the like emotional closeness. Because if you look at, the left side of this diagram here from however many years ago it was in my social network, I was about equal closeness to my partner and a meta. Like the meta of that partner, I was very good friends with, as well as like close to that partner. And even though I wasn't in a formal relationship with that meta, we were still really close. And we're still pretty close friends. And it's very fun to kind of draw this all out. I think I'm a nerd though. But it can also like help you discover connections you didn't realize, because then you show it to one partner and they're like, oh, but so-and-so isn't there. And it can help you really think about different things that happen in relationship networks. Having a map is helpful to seeing where you're going, right? And seeing this laid out so neatly and nicely, it lets you kind of see the dynamics that happen. It can kind of sometimes point out, like, if you have different like sub-circles in your cule, how like here these are my art weirdos, and these are my theater geeks, and these are my sci-fi convention people. Like we can have different groups then that like form together. But it can look pretty messy in sections too, depending on like how enmeshed your relationship network is. So take a second and, if you have a piece of paper around, or if you just want to like do it on your phone, on an app or something, you can take a quick picture of this if you want. And so you can start making your own. And don't stress about it too much. This is supposed to be more for like fun and health and development kind of purposes. So like, don't stress out about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can try and try again. And please remember, this is not prescriptive. If you want to make a fairy godmother granted me the ideal polycule drawing kind of thing, like your dream polycule, the dream makeup, that can sometimes be helpful, especially when you start thinking about the strength stuff that we're going to talk about later in the class. Because, you know, sometimes it is fun to like fantasize about your relationships in the future, the activities you do, the life you'll live with these people. And especially when you're thinking about not just people, but like what they bring to a community and then what they bring to each other. Sometimes then like thinking forward and doing this can be helpful. But I also caution that, because we don't want to create like requirements for the people that enter our lives either. It's okay to have goals and ideals and hopes and dreams, but we want to value people for who they are and in a unique way, because like diversity tends to, you know, be a strength for our world. So don't, you know, try to make this super prescriptive. That might lead to more frustration than anything, honestly. So now that we talked about polycules, we're going to jump into this kind of second topic that goes into this, and then we'll bring it all together again. We're going to use our polycule maps for strength exploration. You know, like I said, there's various reasons why you might want this information drawn out and the way you might use it. Here today, we're going to use it for, you know, looking at the strengths within our networks. And our individual strengths too. So if you saw the message I sent to you before, I said, if you would like to be prepared for class, you can go take this survey at viacharacter.org. It's a strength finder survey. It's all about looking at what are your unique personality strengths and characteristics. And these are the general categories in that survey. The VIA Character Institute has a lot of research about their view of positive psychology and the strength-based approach. And they've come up, you know, with the idea that pretty much all cultures have these as strengths, personality strengths. They tried to make this very like multicultural. It did start very white, European-centric, Western-centric and everything. So like the history of it is a little Western, but they're trying to get a lot more data from other cultures now. And they're still kind of holding true to this, that like these things here are the top strengths that any culture will say is a strength. It might look different in different cultures, but generally things like wisdom, courage, humanity, transcendence, justice, and moderation are seen as good, positive things for people to have, especially when they are like part of a community. These are things that, you know, are strength in an individual sense, but they're also a strength in a community social network sense. Underneath these different categories are more specific types, different specific strengths. And, you know, these can look different from different angles. You can have different strengths in different social situations. But, you know, today we're talking a little bit more in a relationships context, and a community context. But, you know, first we have to talk about like, why is this approach good? Why is a strengths-based approach better than like thinking about pathology and problems all the time? A lot of the time people, if you ask them to like describe themselves, they'll start with the negatives a lot of the time, especially if you're talking professionally. The strengths survey stuff has been applied mostly in professional settings. A lot of companies use that tool to help maximize strengths within workplaces and occupational places. And they're finding that you have much more success in an occupational world, in a company or whatever, if people are maximizing their strengths instead of minimizing their weaknesses. A lot of time you'll just like run your wheels if you're trying to minimize weaknesses, and you'll have a better chance of like healing and moving forward and growing and developing if you focus on maximizing your strengths. There's so much research at the VIA Character Institute. They have so much research connected to that website, but there's a whole lot of research out there that's not even connected to that website. So please, like, if you want to delve into this, go into the psychology journals and PubMed and all these different places and look for that research. If you want a list of that research, I have a list, but it's a little long and academic. It might be overwhelming if you're not that type of person to get into that. But generally, these are the things that they saw were beneficial from a strength-based approach when you're talking to people. You know, using strengths-based approaches builds esteem and confidence. It increases contentment, happiness, all those good feels. You generally strengthen relationships instead of like minimizing them or making them weaker or giving them more problems. People seem to be less stressed when they're like in their strengths, and they manage their problems better usually, or a little more smoothly. The stress tolerance factor goes up. People with these like strength-based approaches, there's a lot of connection to the whole idea of resilience when it comes to a strength-based approach. So that's been really interesting to see. Apparently people with a strength-based approach accomplish their goals more easily too. And the part that I really like is building meaning and purpose. I think when we have a similar purpose in life to the people in our social networks, and we like view that as strength, that we build a community purpose, like a family purpose, a family meaning. And that can be really powerful to the individuals within that network sometimes. So, you know, let's talk a little more specifically now about the VIA Character Institute's version of strengths. Strength-based stuff exists outside of VIA Character Institute and their approach with that survey. There's plenty of other ways of looking at this topic. We're just going to focus on this particular way of looking at it from VIA. You know, they've actually done some research on these like positive psychology concepts within the polyamory community. Some researchers have done it with other sexual minorities too, in different relationship structures like swinging and stuff. So the research is out there on how like polyamorous networks work and the strengths of those networks. You know, but you know, let's go back a little bit and like, what is a strength in general though? According to Lindley in 2008, a strength is a pre-existing capacity for a particular way of behaving, thinking, or feeling that is authentic, energizing to the user, and enables optimal functioning, development, and performance. In this definition, perhaps the most important characteristics of strengths is that they are energizing. They lift you up, give you that boost. Activities that rely on our strengths are enjoyable and feel as if our energy levels are being raised and like they help us move forward through life. While high performance can be the result of both strengths, use, and learned behavior, the experience of increased energy most often applies when using character strengths. And when they looked at some polyamorous sort of individuals in the research, they were able to see like there was some trend among this population. Polyamorous peoples tended to score a little higher in areas of justice and humanity. You know, that we think that might be because polyamory people have like this high level of empathy, and they really seem to get what it's like in other people's shoes. So, and they have this social justice mindset too, because a lot of the time polyamorous people are like have intersectional identities. They're not just polyamorous. They might be gay, they might be queer, they might be kinky, they might have some other type of minority-ness about them that makes them really understand the impact of being a little different, and they appreciate others who are different as well. Also, though, greater levels of intimacy in comparison to monoamorous counterparts has been noticed in some research too. So this openness to intimacy. It's not, always sexual intimacy either. There's a lot more openness to just casual platonic sort of intimacy too in polyamorous circles. Another strength when it comes to polyamory is the polyamorous ideal of a wide social network, which has been seen throughout different literatures and researches to have a substantial support for being a healthy way to operate in this world. Having an extensive social support network, whether you're polyamorous or not, maybe you live in a multi-generational house that is a happy functioning family. Maybe you live in a commune of 150 people or something. These wide social networks are generally good for people, because diverse strengths make sure we can cover each other's asses a lot of the time, but also, support each other on our bad days. And then Conley also pointed out that related to social capital, people in polyamorous relationships appear willing to utilize their relationships in a greater variety of ways than monogamous relationships. Meaning, maybe they have the same toolkit that a monogamous person has, maybe, but they use those tools in very different ways and more ways, and then they apply it to different things. For example, maybe a monogamous couple has great communication skills with each other, and they're just on point all the time about talking about shit that they need to talk about. That might be the same skill set that a polyamorous relationship has, but that polyamorous relationship, those people tend to use those skills even more broadly in different types of relationships than just the romantic ones or sexual ones. And you can kind of look at these different via character strengths and see how a polyamorous mindset or orientation, whatever you want to call it, could open you to some of these strengths. We teach a lot about these individual strengths in individual classes, how to laugh during sex, the humor thing, or how to be fair to your meta with negotiations and boundaries. We talk about a lot of these different things in different ways, and so I think we have an opportunity as a unique community to take our strengths and view it through this specific lens. And I think it works really well together. And a couple other people agree. Michelle Vaughn has been doing some of the best research on affirmative mental health care within consensual non-monogamy. If you are want specifically about affirmative mental health care in non-monogamy, Michelle Vaughn all the way. So let's look at my character strengths profile from the Character Institute. These were my top 5 from my survey that I took last year when I first made this class. And I was not surprised though by most of this. And I don't think many people are surprised, at least by the top couple of ones when they take the survey about themselves anyway. Whenever you get your partners to take the survey as well, you might be more surprised though. I was definitely more surprised when I had some of my partners take this survey. Generally the things I would have thought were strengths for them, they were still on the list in the top 10 maybe, but I might have miscalculated their top 1 or 2. But for me, if it isn't obvious with how much I'm a nerd, I have a great love of learning. That's my top strength, according to that survey. And that falls underneath that category of wisdom. And a lot of polyamorous people have this curiosity aspect of wisdom. or a love of learning. And they bring that to their relationships. I've noticed a lot of polyamory people are also just relationship nerds, and they want to learn more and more and more. They're the ones taking classes about a lot of things. And that's generally, I think, a good thing for our community, right? For me, spirituality, transcendence was my number 2. And this isn't necessarily about religion, though. This is about coherent beliefs that have a higher purpose and meaning of the universe. So for me, my spirituality is like love and sex positivity, and healing the world in that way. That is my like spiritualness. And I bring that purpose and meaning to almost everything I do. Looking at your strengths, you can see how these types of strengths impact every part of your life, not just, romance or your relationships. My spirituality about sex positivity and love definitely affects my professional work as well, as in addition to just wanting to do good in relationships and do good by people. Creativity was there, leadership was there, kindness was there. The kindness factor and the justice factors are very common in polyamory people. But you might be different, and that's fine. I like to think that having different strengths in your different circles is going to, cover your ass someday. What you're not strong at, sometimes your meta is going to be more strong at and be able to save the day, so to speak. So that's mine. That was my top 5. And the survey report gives you like all the strengths right, not just your top 5. So please, think about these and for yourself, but also like how these strengths impact your relationships and your community of relationships, your network. My love of learning transfers to my network because I love teaching, not just in an educator teaching a class sort of way, but also like, yes, I'm a mistress, I'm a dom. I like teaching my submissives and slaves about a topic, a theme, an ethos, or even, a certain material like leather. That transfers to my relationships. There's been times where I've had a partner, a friend that wanted to learn a new subject, or really had to learn a new subject because, life was demanding it of them in a certain way. And because love of learning is such a high strength for me, even if it's not a topic I know about, I'm good at research. I'm good at finding learning, and I'm curious. So I can find resources for any topic, usually, if you give me enough time. I can find, the best way to talk about it for the person. Things like, I use this for learning about a part of a car that I need to repair when I don't have the money to go to a garage. And I can transfer that skill to the people in my network when I don't need to use that skill. So if you could put in the chat what you think your top strengths are. If you haven't taken the quiz, if you know exactly what they are from the quiz, then please share them. I'm very curious what sort of strength profile we have here today. And I would love to do more surveys more widely someday. So I encourage you guys to survey your circles and your networks. And think about not just your individual strengths and what strengths are currently present in your network, but also what do you seek out? What is really attractive to you strengths wise? Or, if you think about it a little deeper, maybe thinking about, I really like and I'm attracted to you know, things like humor or whatever. But maybe I'll be more, you know, moderation type things in my life. Maybe I need someone in my life that's a little more about forgiveness and can teach me about that subject and help that become a strength of my own. It looks like someone in the class says their top 5 were kindness, love of learning, honesty, love, gratitude. Yeah, that sounds very, even if you weren't polyamorous, like relationship nerd. Yeah, like that's a very common, I think, like spread to see in poly people, that kind of theme. And like we might not see things like, you know, the moderation category maybe as often. But you'll still see it there, here and there. I know, you know, things like the strengths that don't show up in your network very often. Sometimes then you realize how important a person is to you because of their very unique strength. And I'm actually going to start with a story about that. If you have a story, I would love for you to present that story. And you can say it through the chat or you can unmute. But like, tell us about a time that your strength, your partner's strengths, your meta strengths saved the day. It may be a one-time story thing, or it might be a trend that you noticed. I'll tell one. So yeah, the person in the chat just said, my last one is number 24 is forgiveness. That fits. Yeah. I don't have great forgiveness either, but my story is I realized how little I valued forgiveness when I took this exam, the survey. And then when I had my roomie quasi-casual partner at the time take the survey, she scored very high at forgiveness. Like it was in her top 5. I did not expect that at all. It wasn't super surprising, but like I wouldn't have put that down. I would have put like curiosity as her top one. And like curiosity and forgiveness sometimes matches. But then I realized that like, yeah, she's not the type of person to like take shit from people, but if she thinks your intent is good, she is the first person to forgive. She has so much loyalty, and that amount of like devotion to moving forward with people, that loyalty to the long term was something I realized that I wasn't that good at and I wanted to be better at. It also helped me realize that like she probably has forgiven me for a lot of shit that I've done. And it's nice to be forgiven. It's nice to know that someone values your relationship and your intent, and is willing to move forward even when you do honestly fuck things up. And so making sure that like you embrace the individual unique strengths in your network, like, you know, my roomie's strength and forgiveness in a relationship way is great. Like saying thank you for that strength of theirs, but also like asking them to teach you. You know, I can ask my roommate to teach me a little bit about forgiveness, or I can just learn by watching her interact with the world a little more, with a little more mindfulness of what she does with her strengths now. But you know, sometimes, you know, if someone's strength is necessarily like forgiveness and curiosity, maybe they're the good mediator for your network. Maybe they're the person you want to be mediating the really bad fights that have happened in your family, and because they'll instill maybe that sense of forgiveness between everyone. You know, think about these stories that you have from your individual experiences, and that will help you, you know, grow and develop your relationships, I think. You know, things like, maybe not even like when it comes to these via character strengths, but, you know, the person who's an introvert, gamer, video gamer type of person in the Polycule doesn't have to have the strength of leadership and being out there and partying and everything. Maybe their strength is the tech stuff, and maybe they can manage the calendars for everyone else. We all have ways of like giving to our communities, and forcing someone to give in a way that is not playing to their strengths is almost like disrespectful. It can be like very frustrating sometimes. Like, I would not want to make me responsible for like doing the artwork for something. Like, I wouldn't want someone to trust me to paint a mural. That would be a frustrating as hell experience for me to paint a mural. I wouldn't do it very well. My hands would cramp. I would be miserable. Let's give that job to someone who would actually be charged by that experience, right? Someone that's going to take that experience and be like, oh, like, yeah, that was a long day of work, but oh, I feel good with this amazing job I did. They'll feel a lot better about that job than I would. And think about that in terms of relationship strengths too. You can add strengths to that map we did earlier. So this is another one of my Polycule maps. I don't know from how long ago. But here I started noting the different strengths of the people in my Polycule. I have that little like pages, like a book for wisdom. Couple people in my network have wisdom as a strength, just like me. We often are attracted to people who are similar to ourselves. You'll notice there's probably some trends in your diagrams, in your maps. And we tend to, just like what we like. And that's okay. But we also want to value the differentness too. And noticing like if part of the diagram leans towards one strength and one part of the map leans towards another strength, that can be helpful sometimes too. Because understanding where you need to pull your resources from is like helpful information to have, even if like I am not close to someone, say looking at this diagram, for example, say I realized I needed a lesson in moderation. I needed a lesson in whether it was, being patient maybe, or taking time, things like that. I could look at this and be like, who in my social network actually has that strength and could give me a more unique, personalized view of how to apply that strength more in my unique life. Because things like moderation look different in different worlds. Moderation in a very conservative household might look like not having sex until you get married. But in polyamory, moderation might mean not going head over heels into new relationship energy, NRE, every chance you get. And, taking a little more slowly and cautiously with new relationships when moderation is key. Sometimes, different situations will call for the different strengths too. And it's good to know that, if a medical crisis happens in your social network at some point, if you know that, one of your people love of learning is their thing, and you had no idea what these doctors are talking about, all these medical terms, and it's just flying over your head, record what the doctor says, send it to the love of learning person who might not be a medical person, just be like, can you define all these weird medical terms that this doctor spewed at me? And your love of learning person is probably going to be like, I got you. Like I've said, diversity of strengths is ideal. It's our world is a big puzzle, and we're all like these different pieces with different angles and notches and bits. And we're all very different. We all might have some similarities or things like that to different degrees. But because we're different, we all fit together like a puzzle, or this mosaic, whatever term or allegory you want to use. And, there's, trends in our social networks. We generally have a very similar ethos and ethics and values as our close loved ones. And, that's good. We want to generally have similar value sets with the people we're close to. Otherwise, things might get really frustrating on the day-to-day. And again, like most of the time, a lot of the strengths-based stuff is very individual. It's thinking about yourself, not necessarily the community level. And when we're thinking at a community level, we need to think about bringing people in more often. It's great if you're a leader and you're teaching classes all the time. I'm right there with you. Like I have that love of leadership thing, and that's what I do. But sometimes the not so obvious, explicit, popular strengths like leadership are what a community needs. When you think about like a club having a VP, secretary, treasurer, president, media person, all these different roles, it's because, the same person who leads the meetings and gets people to agree on stuff and share things and discuss topics, usually doesn't have the strengths to run a spreadsheet with all the numbers of your finances. So, when you are thinking about your organizations, your community events, your clubs, your classes, your socials, think about what type of strengths that are different from you that you want to pull in, and reach out to those people, please. The quieter strengths are necessary. Or, the louder ones that aren't your own are necessary too. Reach out to that person who maybe, lurks in the group chat a little bit, but they post some really cool graphic design stuff that would be like really great for the group. Things like that. Think about what sort of new peoples would help you maximize the love and healing in your networks. Whether that is professional, personal, familial, social, all these different networks. You can apply this stuff, not just to polyamory. In reality, me applying this topic to polyamory is what's new. You can find so many different resources on applying these topics to other types of social networks beyond just, non-monogamy. Okay. So if you are interested in this topic further, these are the things I would recommend. A lot of this idea, especially about the via character stuff with polyamory, and a lot of the research about affirming mental health within non-monogamy has come from Michelle Vaughn. And please, if you have a therapist in your life that wants to talk about non-monogamy, give them this book. And I have some more resources than this. If you want a list of academic journal articles on this topic, I can give you a list too. You feel free to email me. I'm Boldly Cassandra on most platforms. So boldlycassandra@gmail.com. You can email me there and I can send you a list of academic journal articles if that is your kink. I know it's mine. I have the Via Character Institute there. Tikva Wolf is the person who did the Polycule drawings. That's the more popular version that are out there. They can be hired to do your own individual one with cute little cartoons. You can go to my link tree for more of my classes, follow me for future classes. If you want to look more at polyamory, attachment, trauma, mental health stuff in general about polyamory, if you haven't already, please read Policy Cure by Jessica Fern. She has a concentric model in there about attachment, trauma, non-monogamy. Like you'll see that concentric circle models are pretty common in various health fields. And always, no matter the topic, there's hundreds and hundreds of episodes and topics underneath the Multi-Amory podcast. They're on all the platforms and YouTube. Any topic you can think of that's relevant to non-monogamy, you could probably find an episode about under Multi-Amory, and they're usually pretty spot on. So if you need more resources about any topic, please reach out to any of those areas, or, you are welcome to reach out to me. I love talking to new people, especially when they have the same interests as me and we can nerd out together. I also love teaching to new groups of people. I am game to teach a class to your group, whatever you want. But, that is generally the end of our class today, but I have time for questions too. You can, if you have questions, you are very welcome to put them in the chat box. If you want to verbalize them, and you want me to wait until I hit stop recording, you can do that too. Or you can email me a question or send me a message on any of the platforms with your question. If you do send me a question outside of this class, I just ask that maybe you ask it in a way that I can anonymize it and post it as a learning opportunity for others as well. Because I think a lot of the questions people ask me, everyone has, right? I swear if one person asks me one question, at least 5 other people have wanted to ask that question. So I like putting the information about those different questions out there for the world to learn about as well, because you're not alone. A lot of us have the same questions all the time. But yeah, that was polycule mapping and strength finding. Thank you for coming out tonight. Yeah, this is me and my peoples. My wedding, but our bridal parties were so full of our people's relationships too. You're welcome to reach out to my group, Sinners United. That's more San Antonio based though, if you are in this area. And yeah, please reach out if you have any questions. And I look forward to talking to you guys further and seeing you guys at another